So you covered a lot of the auto WCAG and sort of a little bit of the automated testing. So now we're going to move to the other side, which is the manual testing part. And so I'm very pleased to have with us here Eric Velleman from the Accessibility Foundation in the Netherlands. And I believe he will talk about user testing. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Eric.
Okay, so thank you. We looked into user testing of web accessibility. And everybody knows the tools. And everybody knows the problems of tools. I have two neighbors who just explained them. And one of the problems is that tools don't measure everything. And another problem is that everybody wants tools. Because it's just so easy. You just push one button or you click one button online and then you sort of expect this tool to give you the final result of your website accessibility. So you see that a website can have 99%. We saw it in the presentation earlier. But still that 99% is still only 20% of all the guidelines, because only 20% of the guidelines can be automatically tested. So there's 80% of the guidelines that is still open. And part of those are easy to test, but not by a tool. So part of those anyone can test. Would be great if users could test them, we thought. So let's make a tool where users can test accessibility of websites themselves. And they don't have to be people with disabilities. Maybe people without disabilities want to help us test too. And with these tests, we could validate tools and help tools get better. But we may also conclude that tools already give a great view of what you can expect, because what they see is what you get when you ask users to help you test. So, but how do you get users so crazy to do accessibility testing? Because I don't know if, who has done accessibility testing here? Yeah, okay. So, well, then probably most of you know it's a really technical kind of thing. It's not fun. Who thinks it is fun? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That is a diagnosis, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe that is something to go to a psychologist or something then, and yeah. Because in fact, maybe for us it is fun, but for most people you ask, if you give them a list of guidelines, I think there are 64 in total. Shadi, are there 64 guidelines now? 63? Okay. Okay, so more than 60. And I mean, it is a lot of work to go through a website. And then if you follow the web content accessibility guidelines, you have to even look at every web page on a website and go through all these 60 plus guidelines and then test them for these guidelines before you can say that a website is conformant. So that is where a tool comes in. But the tool only looks at 20%. So how do you get somebody who is not a tool but a real human being to help us? So that is why we looked into, can we make a tool that helps them help us, helps them evaluate websites. So we did this first on a website, and which was sort of a problem, because then people have to go to a website, have to open the website and open another browser window and put the website there, and then sort of go from here to there, or maybe you could get the website into your test website, but then who would ever do that after trying it once and then trying these terrible questions that are in there? So we thought, no, we should have something that is in the browser that you're using. So you don't have to open a new window, you just click a button and then something pops up and it tells you, okay, look at this page and then please answer this question. There's an image there, and this is the description. Is that the correct description for that image? And then at the end, there's a button that says send, and then you can send the results to the database. Wouldn't that be great? Well, still, yeah, okay. So I'll show it in a moment. Yeah. So that's what we worked on. And it sounds really easy, but it's not. We have made well, I would say a working prototype. We spent a lot of work in the basis of the tool that we made, but we still need a lot of input. We need input from people on how to ask the questions in a friendly and usable way. Because we have now an example in the tool of the headings on the web page. And then we think like, okay, so a normal web page has like 10 headings or something. But if you open whatever website in this tool, you get like 70 headings. So if for every heading you have to say like, oh, this heading is a good description of the text below it, then you'll do that 74 or more than 70 times, which is sort of extremely boring. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And another problem is that we did it in the form of a bookmarklet that you can quickly open on a web page. We're still looking for websites where it doesn't work. And we're still looking for accessibility issues, still resolving accessibility issues. So there's still, if you're blind, it's still not really easy to use it. But I think we will find a solution to that. But we need input. So it is online now. If you have a computer, you can go to accessiblecheck.com. Not accessibility check, but accessiblecheck.com. There's the bookmark that is there in the form of an image. You just drag and drop the image to your favorites, and then you can click it on any page. So can we open the web page? So this is the web page where you will be, and then you see the image at the bottom of the screen, the user testing tool. So if you drag and drop that to your favorites, could you drag and drop it to the favorites? Yeah? Well, it was already there, but yeah, so yes, you add it. And then it's there twice here on the screen, but okay, we'll resolve that. It'll be only there once. So if you click it now, you will see the bookmarklet. And if you click on the plus with page titles, you can see extra information about what is it we're looking for there. And if you click on check, we didn't rehearse this, but this is going really well. So you can see the page title that it found. So the page title is User Testing Tool EIII. Can you help it? Does the web page title describe the content and purpose of this web page? So let's say yes, and then you press send. Now it sends it to the database where we get it in a specific format that we agreed on in the project, and we can import these data into the automatic data, and then validate automatic data or add information. This is not available automatically, so we can add this to the automated data. If you go back at the bottom, there's a back to home, and then, well, there's one more check, the headings check, and there's two just to get an image, like text alternatives for images. There's nothing there yet, so we're working on this, but this is just to get your feedback on what do you think of this way of doing things. Does it work? What sort of text should we have? How should we address people? Is this more friendly than another method? Or is it still too technical, and do we still have to change things? So this is my question to you. And then at the about, the last one, if you click that open, there's a bit more explanation about the bookmarklet itself, and a link to the web page on EIII where you can find more info. That's it. Thank you.
Terrific, Eric. Thank you very much for that live demonstration. It looks terrific. I think that was a very efficient 50 minutes to get from digital inclusion generally to the practical implementation of user testing. So you have all been waiting patiently, so I'd like to open it up for questions from the floor. No questions? Yes, we do have a question from number 63. And if you could just say who the question is intended for and state your name and organization you represent, please.
My best to do a short answer. So in the AutoWCAG community, we are really looking at the success criteria, and we are trying to find out which part of a success criterion can be tested automatically and which ones have to be done manually. Of course, we are looking also at the techniques, because they give us a lot of information about how to interpret a success criterion, but the tests that we are developing are not based on the techniques. We're really starting from the success criteria level, and then the first step is to find out which elements do we actually have to look at, to have some kind of partition, which elements you do. And then we have a lot of test steps in each test, and for each of these steps we have an indication whether this can be done automatically. So for example, for most of the tests it's quite easy to select the element that has to be tested automatically. So the idea is to do everything that can be done automatically by a tool, and only the parts that really need user input, they are done by a human being. So the tool can select, just as we saw on the UTT demonstration that Eric did, the tool can select the image, it can extract the alternative text and present this to the user with a very specific question. So we don't have the general success criterion that you are asked to apply, but you get a specific question that you have to answer.
Terrific. Good question, good answer. Any other questions from the floor?
My name is Detlef Fischer, DS GmbH in Germany. I'm not part of the ministry as listed here in the list you've got. I have one question about what you are checking. I realize there are some other tools that claim to check the past source code, so that they don't check the code that that is presented if you go to source code view, but they actually check the page after the page has been loaded and changes have been inserted by JavaScript, which is a very common scenario today. What you're doing is that, are you checking the past source code or the source code before passing?
I believe that's a question from Mikael.
Thank you for asking the question, Detlef. This is an important point, and we've been putting some effort in actually testing the parsed code. So JavaScript has been applied before we run the tests. This is done with a module called a headless browser. So this, to a far extent, will resemble and most of the times be the same view that a person using a browser would see.
Great, thank you, Mikael. Any other questions? We have a question from number 68.
Yeah, I'm also just a number. No. Hello, my name is Niels van der Linden. I'm from Capgemini Consulting. I'm also in the project lead for the eGov benchmark. So I was very pleased to see that some of the sample that we collected was reused in the checker. I do have one question. We see more and more people using their mobile devices to access the internet. This might also be a solution. I think you mentioned this as well for the inclusion of certain groups, especially in parts of Europe where infrastructure is less well available. I was wondering, what's your view on this in terms of the tool that you've developed, and more in general, what could be done to further support this?
Actually, I would be interested to hand it to two people. One is Susanna, just to see if this is part of what you're doing, and then pass it on to Mikael to answer it from an EIII perspective. Susanna?
We are looking very much into mobile things, but in the scope of this assignment for the Commission, it is only desktop. That is so it's out of the scope of this, what I was talking about here. But of course, in all other that is a Pandora's box kind of question, because when you start talking about mobile, then you get the discussion on what is WCAG really measuring, and then we can go on forever. But good question.
Excellent. Mikael?
So what we're doing from our perspective on mobile is that clearly some of the tests that are included in WCAG will cover mobile aspects, and we'll try to cover these as far as we can. And then from the architecture of what has been built, this open source tool, it's possible to add new tests if we would find out that there is some particular aspect that we'd like to extend for covering mobile users' needs.
Thank you, Mikael. Any other questions from the floor? I realize we have a coffee break coming up, but don't worry, because I'm getting tired of standing. We have time for one more question. And back to the gentleman.
Just another quick one. In the checks that are listed on the checker, and I like it very much that you are very transparent about listing exactly what you have checked. There's one or perhaps more occasions where you indicate there's some additional human evaluation needed, like for 2.4.6 headings and labels, that needs some human evaluation. Has that actually been done in that evaluation of thousands of websites? That must have been a horrendous job, or is it something that's going to be added in some way? Is that included in the results?
I think that's another two-part answer. Mikael and then Eric.
So the part that we will deal with is that we haven't done this for thousands of web pages. What we have done is to try to make the user aware, like you have seen, that this test is giving you what we can do automatically, and if you really want to know if it fulfills all parts of the criteria, you need to do and check manually in addition, which I think Eric can explain more about.
Yeah. The manual checking that we have currently is that you search your own page and then use the bookmarklet. The idea is that we can make a link to the automatic tool and ask people to look at specific pages for us, and then ask them specific questions. So that would make it easier to say, okay, we have this specific website, and you could think of even organizing panels to then answer questions if you do specific research on a series of websites. Yeah.
Terrific, thank you. We can take one last question, I believe. We have a question from number 64. I don't mean by keep calling you by numbers, but I don't know your name, so please state your name.
My name is Walter van Zeeland. I'm from the Netherlands EIII Association. I have a question about harmonization between these automatic tools and manual testing. Because if you look at, for example, the highest tested Dutch website, I think it's a municipality. Later on there was a Dutch research where that website came out as not fully accessible. So there's two tests. It's the highest test in Europe, but then in a Dutch study, it came out as not fully accessible yet. So I'm wondering how you're going to do this harmonization.
It's a good question. It's a rather specific one. I don't know if Mikael is familiar with the local version, but Mikael?
We have seen that there are cases where we're missing out on important tests. The good news is that in many situations you will have tests that are automatable that will be highly correlated with those tests we cannot automate. To study this in further detail, I think we will be able to have access to more data from Iceland. I hope this will be possible. And then we'll compare in a larger study and see if we can align this in practice to a larger extent than we do today.
Great. Thank you, Mikael. Eric, you have something to add?
Because this specific website that we're talking about, I know it. There you can see that the automated testing gives you an impression of the accessibility of a website, but there's still a lot of other things you might want to test manually. So there, I think, is the way you want to combine manual and automated testing, like we're doing in this project. So and then manual testing, not just one person, but ask a lot of persons to look at this website and maybe discover new barriers that are not in the accessibility guidelines even. So things that could make the website really better. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that local insight. I wanted to come back to Jaroslaw before we end the panel. because he brought up a very important point that was mentioned in the keynote address by Liz this morning, which is the awareness and capacity of, in Liz's case, it was more specifically the website owners, but Jaroslaw touched on it from a higher level perspective in terms of policymakers. Jaroslaw, could you discuss a little bit what you have found so far in your report and work in terms of the level of awareness amongst policymakers? You mentioned it was a low priority. So is that a low priority just generally, or is it because they're not aware of exactly how important the topic is? Jaroslaw, last word of the panel.
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, we are just now carrying out the research on the screening how the transposition of the accessibility in the ICT environment comes into the materialization. So we'll be able most probably shortly to release some data on this. However, we introduced the accessibility component into the all relevant meetings on the interactions with those who can make the change. And we noticed that in fact there is a huge need for the change agents at the national level and strengthened advocacy. And this advocacy can just happen also not only via the one believer in the idea of the accessibility, but it has to be also backed up by quite significant push by the all multi-stakeholder stakeholders who are just working on the subject. So therefore this, I think, will succeed once we will create the platforms which will be clearly not only raising the issue of the challenges and showing the cause, but also providing the solutions. And this is something what we are looking for at the ITU, not only as the platform for the technical standardization, but also as the platform who is building the capacity of those who, by the end of the day, would change the environment once they are acknowledging, yes, we have to make accessibility as the obligation, and maybe not, and introduce a certain wording in the policies. So I think that there is a lot of potential for work for all stakeholders. We would be very keen to get those who are working on the new innovative approaches, technical solutions, to demonstrate them at the platform of the ITU. As I mentioned, we have series of the activities. In fact, the accessibility has been defined as the top priority in, I think, almost all regions. So the European Regional Initiative is also not the only one where the accessibility appeared. And there is a huge potential for also taking a look at this, how the other regions could benefit from this, what is happening in Europe, which is quite advanced in these terms. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Jaroslaw. We're going